You'd love it. It's the weather, the beaches, the people. For you, especially with the running, I think you'd really enjoy it.
I have a really good friend who moved to Adelaide, Australia. It was for he was doing a postdoc. He was a PhD candidate, and he moved there 3 years ago, and he's kept extending his postdoc. I think in part because he really likes where he is.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, is he a runner as well?
Yeah, we used to be training partners. In fact, he doesn't run much anymore. I think he's in his mid 30s now, and he's put it on the back burner the last few years. But yeah, we were training partners for quite a few years.
Nice. I mean, I think out here there's such a massive running culture in general. Um,
Hmm.
Adelaide is very different to Sydney.
Okay,
Um, so I don't know how to kind of describe it in terms of places you might know, but Sydney is a lot more of a wellness orientated culture, I'd say,
gotcha.
than a lot
Okay,
of others. There's run clubs on every street corner. Every coffee shop on the weekends is full to the brim with runners outside, and
it's
it's
kind of
very
a
hard not to get sucked into it.
really okay. Well, it might be some type of a like Western world kind of thing because Toronto is the same and New York is now the same, and I mean California has been that way for a while. But I yeah, it feels like it's inside of the of Western culture now. I'm not really sure why. But everybody seems to be running. My Strava got way more popular in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I wonder why that. I, mean, I don't. I wonder if COVID had something to do with it because I remember. So I'm 26. How old are you? Sorry.
29.
And, okay, so similar age brackets, but it was. I remember just coming out of education and into the real world, as it's seen as. um, it was always a massive emphasis on sort of more bodybuilding and gym training, and there's so many more gyms popping up everywhere.
Hmm.
Influencers were taking a hold of the world, and everyone wanted that kind of lifestyle. And it feels like it's over the past couple of years transitioned into running more than weightlifting. I don't know if you've seen the similar things. You're probably in a much better position to see it than I am.
I mean, I've seen it a little bit. I wonder if it's just a latent effect of people not being allowed to go into gyms for a while. And COVID starts, everyone starts running, and now we are, what, 3, 4 years past it. And some people have kept up with it. Some people did it for the 9 months and then the gyms opened and then they went back. Or us, it was 9 months and then on and off and on and off. And I know Australia had quite the awful scenario with COVID that everything was closed for like quite a long time. But
Mm.
um, some people, I think, when gyms opened up, they decided that they liked the running thing and they wanted to keep doing that.
Yeah, I feel like it's a mix of so many things coming into play where beforehand, obviously everyone at a younger age is like, okay, I just want to look good. I want to look good. I want to
Mhm.
look stronger and be healthier. They did so well with that. And then quickly realized if they were to just follow the bodybuilding slash muscle building techniques and strategies and lifestyle, there's so much left on the table which you're lacking. I remember at one stage, the biggest I ever was strength wise, I was about 100 kg. Um,
Wow. Okay.
I, I can see you trying to convert that in your head to what pounds.
Yes, that's exactly what I
Yes,
was doing. I was like, hey, that's like a 220. Okay. Okay.
yeah, it's just, well, I was probably about like 210 pounds at the time. And I remember I looked great. People would look at me and think, oh, you must be in great shape. But then I distinctly remember one day during a bulk period that I just went up a ran up a short flight of stairs and I was gassed at the top. I was like, this
Right.
isn't
Because
right.
you're carrying a
I'm
lot
like
of weight, right?
carrying a lot of weight, but then looking good doesn't translate to feeling good within your body. You may
Hmm.
get great positive affirmations from the people around you, but not from the actual workout itself, like the
Yeah.
lifestyle itself. So
Yes.
then I feel a lot of people went, okay, we'll go hybrid. Hybrid's a huge thing now, where they've got
Hmm.
the running and the weightlifting, and feeling the actual internal benefits more so of what running gives to you, which I feel is
Yeah.
taking a lot
It's
of
probably,
people.
yeah, agree. It's probably the best way to go too. With what we know with how people age and how important it is to keep your cardiovascular health strong, but also to keep some muscles on your frame. Put those together, you know, you need the dual around here. this thing called High Rocks has become very popular. I don't know if it's made it to
Same
your,
here.
it
Yeah.
seems to be very
Yeah.
global, right?
Yeah, for sure. Everywhere.
Would you try one?
Um, See, I feel like I'm at a weird stage of my own training because by trade, I'm a personal trainer. So I
Okay.
know a lot of the ins and outs and the technicalities of it. But when it comes to my own training, because I'm so into it with the science behind it for other people, I like to relax with my own training more and enjoy it as
Mhm.
much and not overanalyze my own training. Because I kind of go through those cycles. I remember I saw one of your skits you did on your Instagram about one of the world's best marathon runners. And he's like, so what do you do this? Do you do this? It's like, I just kind of run.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's funny you saw that. Yeah, no, I feel like we inside of the running world there people have this conversation all the time when it seems like half of the runners are very metrics driven people and they love to see their sleep score improving and their VO2 max scores as dictated by their watch get higher. And then there's this other group of people who tend to be the more experienced runners in a weird way, who don't really bother with that and who have learned to go mostly off feel. And so it's just kind of this weird conversation between a beginner who's super metrics obsessed and someone with a bit more experience who's like, yeah, I couldn't tell you what my VO2 max is, but I know how fast I should be doing my 400-meter repeats, you know?
Yeah. It's funny how you said it a bit more experienced, like it's a fitness maturity kind of thing.
I think it is. Like, I guess for the first, I've been running for what, maybe 15 years now. And after running for 5 years, even, I already felt like an expert because most people that I encountered didn't do it or were just maybe a little bit interested in getting into it. And now I feel like most of the people that I talk about running with are newcomers.
Mm. So where do you fall along that spectrum? Do you, 'cause obviously you know the ins and outs of the fitness side of things and the metric side of things. Is it something you keep close tabs on? Because obviously you do your competitive runs as well. Is it something
Yeah,
you've got a keen eye to?
I've been challenging myself because I did a bit like you for a while, where I would tell myself, I don't need to know my sleep score. I don't need to know my heart rate variability. I know how I feel in training, and I'm going to go off that. Like I work with a coach, I tell him how the workout went, I tell him how fast I went. That informs him to select my sessions for the next week, and that's it. But this year, in the last like 12 months, I've had a pretty solid breakthrough for my own competitive running. And that's mostly due to staying healthy and avoiding injuries, which had been a challenge for quite a few years. And now I'm getting to this point where I realize that if I want to keep getting better, I probably need to start doing those little things, prioritizing my sleep and tracking it, trying to find out, maybe there's some foods that I shouldn't be eating right before bed, or maybe there's a food that I can implement in my diet to help me recover better. I started creatine, for example, which is never something that I touched before. So after like a year or so of telling beginners that like just listen to your body, don't give in to all these crazy fads, I'm like slowly becoming the fads person because I want to see where I can get that extra little 1%. So it's kind of, I feel like a bit of a hypocrite in the last 2 or 3 months that I'm walking back this thing because I think the truth is if you want that last 1, 2, 3% out of your body, you have to get a little bit anal about things.
Yeah, I get that, and it's kind of a catch-22, which you find I feel like most social influencers and guides and people who are genuinely trying to help those, like you say, you speak with a lot of new entrants into the running world, where you've got this information. It's like, hey, this is why I'm saying to do these certain things, where it might feel natural to you, but you kind of get to a stage, don't you, where you feel like you're preaching these things, and then at a time you don't do them yourself, where it's almost because that's become intrinsic, but you kind of have to remind yourself and them about these things at the same time, which is like
For
a
sure.
crazy dynamic for wanting to help people, but then not practicing what you preach in the same regard.
Well, it's just like how it's so easy to give other people advice when you hear someone else's problem and you're like, oh, yeah, obviously just need to tell the person that he's being a jerk or whatever. And it's so hard for you to do this thing because you're weirdly more emotionally invested to what's going on in your life, obviously. So I think it's a bit like that with training. You have your rational mind telling you to do XYZ, and then you have just your past experience that'll tell you, I trained a full season without taking creatine and without minding my sleep too much. I can do the same thing again and I'll be fine, even if I'm not really putting odds in my favor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like with a lot of these changes as well, I feel that there is a long kind of return horizon where you're not going to notice those returns straight away. So how long have you
Mhm.
been now taking creatine
It's
for your running?
been since late January because my last real race was a half marathon in mid January, and I told myself I would start after. Like if I'm implementing something new, I like to implement it at the very start of a training block, just so that I have
Mm.
time to adjust if I have to. And yeah, so that means I'm almost 2 months into it, and I can't say I've felt a big difference, but also I haven't run into any problems. And so the reason I took it is because there's some new research showing that it might really help with endurance runners and muscle recovery. When in the past, creatine was associated with gyms, right? It was this
Yeah.
bodybuilder supplement that maybe you should take. And I have a friend, actually a colleague in our startup media publication, running publication, who is a sports scientist, and he's also quite a good runner, and he started on creatine. So I pinged him one day and I was like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And he says it can't hurt, right? The worst thing that can happen is you might pick up a bit of water weight. Some people do retain more water weight on creatine, and you do that for a couple weeks. If that happens to you, you can adjust and stop taking it. It'll go away, it'll be fine. That's the worst that can happen. So I started it, and yeah, 2 months later, I don't know if I feel much. It's hard to know, but also I haven't blown up into an injury, so I think that's probably a good sign.
Yeah. When you're working with such kind of when you're working with seconds, shaving seconds off of a long distance time as well, I feel like that can be very hard to. You need a lot of data and a lot of actual races to get that kind of information. But I'll say, what was that? What was the study? The new information with creatine and endurance athletes.
Oh, I'm not sure if I can pinpoint the exact one, but there's just been a couple coming out in the last few years that looked at whether or not it had any impact or any, I guess, any impact on muscle recovery for endurance sports in general, and they found some
Mm,
evidence. So to me, it was enough. It's like it's been replicated a couple times, and what compels me most to try something new like that is when there isn't much finding of a negative side effect, because
mm,
I think in general, I feel like I have 90% of my training down. I get it. Like I 90% of it is good. I don't need to introduce something that'll screw things up. So if I introduce something that might help me run faster, but also might destroy my sleep, for example, I probably won't try it. But the fact that there hasn't really been anything found on creatine that I know of that could be really detrimental to a distance runner, I just thought that I would try it.
yeah, I think it's. I think well, from my obviously, I have more of a strength and conditioning background than an endurance
Mm.
background. So, do you know the reasons creatine is a big supplement now, or the reason we should have it? Have you looked much into that previously?
Not so much, no. Have you?
A bit, yeah. So, with creatine is ATP. That's so the creatine
Yes.
chemical ATP, adrenaline triphosphate, blah blah blah, something sciencey. But that is a compound which we used to get in abundance because it comes from red meats. We get
Yes.
it. That compound is naturally found in red meats. However, it disintegrates that compound when you cook those red meats. So the
I see.
reasons we don't get it so much anymore in today's world, where it's so beneficial to us, is that we just don't eat raw red meat anymore since we've been able to cook things since we
Right.
invented fire and utilized that. Our levels of creatine has just dropped substantially. So
Interesting.
us taking this now, this is why there's no negative benefits to us whatsoever. It's because it's something that naturally we should be getting in abundance, but we just don't anymore. And
Right.
even
And it's
going,
naturally occurring too, right? Like this is
yes,
something that exists in our bodies too, so it's not that foreign. So now it's the decision is either go back to raw meat or take the little white creatine powder.
as it seems at the moment, yeah. But then that's the the beauty of it, because obviously there's a lot of things with water retention and recovery speeds, not having too much. But then I'm really interested at the moment about the mental side of creatine, how they advise everybody to take creatine, especially older people, because of how
Hmm.
it helps to keep the brain functioning as a muscle as well as
Yes.
everywhere else, where it's
Yeah.
taking it aside from running or weightlifting. You've got now, okay, if it's just going to be good for your recollection and memory and general function, it's hard to think of a way or a reason not to take it.
Hmm. Exactly. Yes, I remember seeing that as like a potential positive side effect, and I thought, geez, wouldn't that be nice? Like my in my day, I have a total low point. That's the afternoon, like between 1 and 3 p.m. I just can't seem to get anything done, and then I pick up again, and I have great mornings. But thought, hey, if I can take something that can keep me a little bit up in the afternoon, that's also a huge positive.
Yeah, and then that's also genetics as well. I mean, I think it's called the postprandial dip, I believe, which is so with sleep. Obviously, you have your kind of circadian rhythm where you go up, start higher, and it kind of that I can't remember the compound, but it drops throughout the day. But as
Hmm.
soon as we've eaten our lunch, it takes a little dip before coming up again. And that, like,
Hmm.
I've suffered with that as well. Like, if anything, as you say, like between that 1 and 3 p.m., don't ask me to do anything that requires a lot of attention, or else it just won't be as high functioning as it would be at, say, 11 a.m. for me now, which is the
Yes.
perfect time for me to do something like this,
Yeah.
engage my brain in a conversation. I don't know about 8 p.m.,
8 p.m. 8
but
p.m. is usually not so bad. I might peter off once 9:30 hits. Send me an alert if I'm starting to sound slow. But yeah, the other thing is also when you do your activity, right, can help influence that in any certain way. Like when you do your training, when do you fit in your training bout in a day?
myself, I always used to be an afternoon to evening exercise. So
Okay.
I used to finish work 5 p.m., go at about 6, 7 p.m., have a massive meal afterwards, and then I was okay to just crash completely.
Hmm.
But I find, even though that's where I feel I'm kind of the most able to do physical work, I like the benefits of doing it first thing in the morning because I'm more alert then for the rest of the day, and it kind of jump
Right.
starts my day quicker, even if that's not the most optimal time for that better training. What about
Yeah.
yourself?
I'm on that same train right now. I flip flop, and in the height of training, I'll do doubles. So I'll wake up in the morning, I'll do a run, and then have my full day of work, and then do my second training of the day at 4 or 5 p.m. This training block, for whichever reason, instead of doing two, I do one long one. This is the voodoo of my coach speaking, and I just follow orders, which has been a blessing for me in the last years is to just put everything on a coach and go that way. But it's big afternoon sessions now. So I'll wake up, I'll have a pretty productive morning. I'll suffer through work for a couple hours, and then I'll get ready for my 4 or 5 p.m. exercise routine. It's usually takes something like 2 hours, and then same thing, huge meal, and then sleep.
So what's the your coach's rationale behind that?
Behind doing once a day over two.
Yeah, just changing things up from where you were previously. If it was, I mean, it seems like you've been breaking your own personal records and doing well. Why the sudden
Yeah.
change?
So we need to you we haven't talked about this, he and I, in a long time, but one one philosophy that exists in the world of running is to change things up because the body responds to stimulus. It's kind of the same with strength training, right? If you keep doing the same things, you keep getting the same results. And so it's pretty good to do from one season to the next, to alternate things, not only increasing the training load, increasing the intensity, but also just moving things around. And so I've seen a lot of athletes do that, go from singles, like long singles in one season, down to doubles in the next season, because each seem to carry their own individual set of benefits. Like learning to do long singles every day trains your endurance in a certain way, where running 18 to 20 kilometers a day all together starts to feel normal, and you develop your strength and endurance in that sense.
Hmm.
The benefit of the doubles on the other side of things is that it's a little bit easier on the body. Say for example, I have 20 kilometers to cover in a day. if you go and do 7 in the morning, take a good break for 8 hours. I think they recommend roughly 8 hours between runs, and then do your remaining, what did I say, 7? So 13K in the afternoon. Well, then you might be less likely to strain your body and get injured. So there are positives on both sides. And maybe I think that because I've been able to handle, I'd run something like 100 to 110 kilometers a week. Because I've been able to handle that for a season, now we're trying to clip a few runs together and see if I can make that 18 to 20 kilometer run feel pretty routine and easy.
Got you. It seems very similar to the rationale behind sort of hypertrophy work versus pure strength work.
Mm.
Whereas the idea between hypertrophy is just to get as much volume as possible, essentially, over the course of your day, week, like whatever you might be working to or at. Whereas there's like a very famous Russian model for strength training, which is it isn't about the volume per se, it's about the skill itself. So the more you can get good, almost perfect practice of that one very specific skill, then you will get better at that one specific skill.
Right.
And I can see that tying in very well between, so obviously the zones, which are very popular within running. So you've got the zone 2,
Yeah.
zone 3, zone 4.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got zone 2 being more akin to, right, it's less intensive on the body, but you can get a lot more volume at that. So you're gaining your volume, improving your capacity, and you're not getting that more higher heart rate, more lactic acid inducing workouts at the same time. You can only do it once per day and only for so long. But if you split that up, you can then get those more higher intensity workouts together. So when you're doing the splits now, as opposed to also you've gone the other way around, when you were doing your splits, was each run more intense than your longer one now?
No, not particularly. The splits versus the single runs would happen on easy days. So those would be the days where I'm not going anywhere above zone 2, let's say, if I'm doing it right. Now there is a small caveat to that, but simply that's kind of what it is. And last season when I was doing doubles, and this season when I'm doing singles, I still maintain 3 workout days per week. So on the other days, in both seasons, it's one hard run on, say, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. And Sunday is a longer run with some fast stuff incorporated in there, and Tuesday, Thursday is mainly speed. And the little ripple inside of all that, and this is somewhat, I'll say somewhat revolutionary from my coach, because this isn't very common practice, at least among the runners that I've spoken with, is we've added a small, intense period or little intense fartlek routine, like speed training routine inside of every run. So anytime that I'm going easy, inside of that, I will do 5 minutes at my lactate threshold pace, which
in the middle, not at the end.
In the middle, yeah, in the middle, not at the end. I could also do it at the end for whichever reason I do it in the middle, but that's just not something that people tend to do. The old way of thinking, and the common way of thinking, is that you keep your easy days easy so that you can make your hard days hard. And we've jumbled that a little bit based on the idea that the more training that you can do per week at that lactate threshold pace, like that pace right before your body starts accumulating more lactate than it can clear, the fitter you get. And you have these huge outsized benefits, as the Norwegians have shown us in the last few years, and especially the Ingebrigtsen family. So that's kind of a little experiment that we've been doing. But yeah, to answer your question, the doubles were usually done on easy days, and same for the long singles.
That's interesting that he's started doing that, the fartlek style. Is it true fartlek style where it's randomized when you will do that higher threshold stuff? Or do you know when it's coming up?
It's randomized in that I choose when to do it in the run. So it's not like, well, at 20 minutes you must do this, but it's not randomized in the sense that every day it's 5 minutes. So it's not like I'll have a coach with me saying, okay, pick it up, okay, slow it down, which I guess is kind of that was the true fartlek, right? Where you're going into the fartlek and you're training with a few other people, and someone takes the lead for however long until someone else chooses to take the lead and either pick it up or slow it down. So it is completely random.
Yeah. That's I asked because when I was doing my personal training stuff prior, we used to do similar things on the bike or on the treadmill, where I would kind of tell a story of what's going in as if they were in a race, or they're going up a hill or down a hill, so they can pick it up, they can slow down, they can change the incline, and they wouldn't know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, and especially when you're talking, well, preparing for a race or an event, you don't know when you're going to be at those tougher moments where someone's going to be trying to overtake you, and those decisions where you have to decide to pick up your pace or preserve your energy or maintain your advantage at a certain part of that track, or different elevations and different tracks around the world. And Andrew, because I'm just going to search up now, I can't remember what the book was called or who wrote it. I think, is it Endurance? Okay, sorry. Yes, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the book. Oh no, it might not be called. Yes, Endure. The book was called Endure: Mind, Body, and the Curiosity of Elastic Limits. And yeah.
Sorry, I could have helped you.
Ah, perfect. Yes.
So
have you read it?
Yeah, I have. So the book's written by Alex Hutchinson. So he lives close by. He's from Toronto, and he actually,
beautiful.
Yeah, and he's a terrific runner. We contribute to the same publication, the Globe and Mail. He and I, and he's been a role model really from inside of the running world, as he's been a very high level runner, and also as a writer, he's someone that I've always looked up to. And he doesn't live that far, so every now and then we'll go for a run. So Alex is a stellar guy.
Oh, that's amazing. I remember picking up his book last year to read through, and it's always interested me the balance between what is mental and what is physical. I think his book Endure plays that symphony perfectly between. I don't know whether it was my preparation or just my mindset or what happened, and even just the kind of placebo of having an incorrect time, or which gave him that extra boost of energy.
And
especially when you're incorporating that fartlek style stuff. That's why I mentioned it.
It's such a good thing to implement in training, because what happens to me anyway when I don't do much of that randomized stuff, and also when I don't race, is I become really good at working out. Like I become really good at doing 3 by 10 minutes at 3-minute pace, and I can do that, and I start at this pace, I end at this pace. It's like doing it on a treadmill. But put me in a race where, okay, 3 by 10 minutes at 3 minutes per kilometer, that's a 30-minute 10K. Okay, put me in a race where I'm trying to break that, which is my current goal. That's speaking from experience, exactly what I'm trying to do. And if the pack doesn't go out in a 3-minute kilometer, but goes out in a 3:20, and then drops it down to 2:53s for a few kilometers, and I'm not used to changing things, well, then I drop, because you're not used to that change in pace, and so that's so important. So yes, I it's in his very first chapter, right? He's like, Alex Alex Hutchinson was a college student, and he's running in some track, I think in Quebec, and they read the splits wrong. And so he thinks he's running slowly. I haven't read this book in years. So is this what it is? He thinks he's running slowly, and so he picks it up, but he was actually going really quickly.
Yeah. So he picks up his pace and then set his own personal best in that last lap because of that, because he thought he was behind his pace when he thought he was doing everything right. And that idea to me is just mind-boggling. How I feel like that when it comes to competitive athletes, that's what I feel separates them, is that competition. Where, especially if you're running in a group, running in the pack, I'm starting to feel like when I've been running in groups or doing anything else in a group situation, race-wise, it's almost like an evolutionary thing. And you can see it in animals as well, where, let's say, birds in the sky or fish in a school, where they kind of have that peripheral vision, and if they can see somebody coming up behind them or to the side of them, almost like instantly you pick it up without even thinking about it. And if you have that kind of mentality with other people around you, it can push you so much more. So I find it bizarre. It's bizarre and really interesting. I don't know how somebody would necessarily incorporate that into their daily training to get that practice. But yeah,
I struggle with it because a lot of my runs I do by myself. And the reason is I don't have a training group out here. It's just kind of how it is in the city. There are not that many runners who have these same goals. And we are all mostly on our own schedules and we all work and have busy lives outside of the running. And so every now and then we'll get together. But a lot of my hard workouts, it's just me. So then it becomes the battle with yourself. I think the one of the themes in the book is on the central governor theory by Tim Noakes, which is how close you can get your mind to your physicals. In theory, your mind is supposed to tell you to stop running or training or doing something hard before your physical gives out. And I was talking to another colleague of mine, Michael Doyle, about this. He was saying the other day, he says some of the most impressive athletes are those who've managed to quiet that central governor to the point where the mind doesn't tell you to stop until the second before your physical is starting to shut down.
yeah, you get that. It's almost like, so I play a lot of football, soccer, and
Okay.
like I get that sense where if I were to go, I can. I feel like I'm quite a fit, healthy person. I can run quite far. I can do quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout a game, I can play 90 minutes at almost pace, full pelt the whole game. The
Mm-hmm.
second that full time whistle goes, my legs are shot to pieces. I feel like I'm going to drop completely.
Yeah.
But if you took away all the other players and you asked me to do the exact kind, in essence, it is like fartlek training, and you just gave me those intervals to do and to carry on going, that central governor is going to tell me to stop. Probably after about
Totally.
half an hour, I'll be slowing down and wouldn't be able to keep that up. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it does come down a lot at times. I'm still trying to figure it out. So speaking to people like yourself and others, still trying to figure out whether or not that is something that you can control, or is it genuinely just down to your primitive, egocentric brain, where if there's another person challenging you, and it's not just yourself, go for it. You'll just have that
Mm.
extra reserve energy.
I think it's trainable. I've thought about this before. I think it's trainable, and it's there's a part that's internal that you can train, and there's a part that's external. I think if you made someone who's never run or trained before, if you made them train for a race for X amount of weeks and then run the race, I would bet that on race day they have that extra. They run better. They have this extra boost. I actually have an example of this. So my fiance's brother started running training. He lifted weights. He's a fit guy, but he wasn't a runner. And he started running about 2 years ago. And after a few months, he did a half marathon. And he set a goal for himself based on what he could do in training. And he completely smashed his goal. Part of it was because he didn't really have the experience, but the other part of it is he just started running on race day and felt like he could go faster. Now that happens more with beginners, but that jolt of adrenaline was there to help him move forward. But I also think that there's a part of it that's trained and learned. And what I mean by that is you get better at racing the more that you race. You get better at pushing yourself. And pushing yourself also means pacing yourself, right? So that you can get to the end and completely spend yourself by the time the race is over and not go out way too hard and then end up running slower because you had nothing in the tank. I think it also prevents against those times when you do your race and you finish and you feel like you gave maybe 85% and it's not enough and you just are kicking yourself and you're telling yourself I could have gone faster, but when things got tough I kind of threw in the towel. I think racing a couple times helps get rid of that feeling because it's a bit based in fear, I think.
Yeah, because I think as a lot of people, and I've been at fault of this myself, when you've got this idea and you start to visualize the outcome and what you would like to achieve, and especially if it's further away, and it's even more especially if it's something that you've maybe not complete beginner to, because then you have those no expectations, but you've done a few of them beforehand. That fear can kind of prevent you from breaking that limit because you know where you're in your head. You feel like you know where your limits are because it's hard to test those limits without a lot more experience.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, 100%. It's scary do something that's very physically tough. And I've known people who tried something really hard for the first time and went so hard that they lost consciousness. And I know a lot of other people, and the second type is probably more common, people who tried something and were a little bit tentative about it because it was their first time and they wanted to make sure that they could finish the thing.
Mm. And it's obviously everyone has their own goals going into something, especially running, whether it be a marathon or an ultra. A lot of people's goals are it's an achievement just to do it. A lot of people want to break their own records, and it's you do get the sense that the best of the best, not only are they elite athletes and put everything into it, they're also performers in a way. They thrive under that pressure of performance, of knowing that they put themselves in a position where people will be looking at their score. They have got friends in that arena and coaches who will be looking at it afterwards, and they don't crumble under that pressure. They can rise to that pressure and say, I'm not going to let them down, or I'm going to give my best. I'm going to show that, where you might not get that even as a very experienced casual athlete.
Mm-hmm. Totally. It's a skill. It's a skill to show up when it matters. A friend of mine, I was debating with a friend of mine on the existence of the quality of being clutch. Does that mean something in Australia when you say someone is clutch?
Yeah, I think people get it. Yeah, definitely.
Like the person who's going to score the winning goal, the person who will show up when it matters. Like that's clutch in Canada and America. So if the slang is carried over, I wondered if that's actually a thing, or if it's just something that we make up where we remember our favorite athletes who just happened to score the goal when the game was on the line, and we've attributed this quality to them and said, "Oh, this person's clutch. You got to put them. You got to put them on the ice. You got to put them on the pitch when the going gets tough."
Yeah,
But I don't know.
so.
Do you think there's a gene? Do you think that exists?
I don't know if it's a gene. I do believe, though, that part of that is ingrained from very specific, memorable events when you were younger, where you have made that game-winning goal or penalty or put that effort in, and you were rewarded for that, and you succeeded in that at a very early age, where you then built and snowballed that mentality of, I can do this when the going gets tough. But not everyone succeeds in those moments. As a big soccer player, and end of a big soccer match in a tournament, you often have a penalty shootout. And the penalty shootout is the most brutal way to end the game, where you've just spent 90 to 120 minutes giving it your all, and now it all comes down to one kick with every single person watching you. You pick up the ball, you walk from the halfway line all the way to the spot, and that is it. It's one kick. You're either the hero or you're the villain.
And you're supposed to score.
Of course, yeah, you're supposed to score.
Yeah.
You want to score. It's, in essence, if you take that pressure away, it's not a difficult thing to do. Goal's pretty big. Goalkeeper only takes up so much size of it. You're only 12 yards away. It's not a difficult thing to do with no pressure. But as soon as you put, let's say you take it to the nth degree of the World Cup, and not only have you got a stadium of 100,000 people around you, you have got a whole country who want you to score, a whole nother country who want you to miss. The rest of the world is watching, and you're already tired and gassed from that whole thing. That pressure will get to the toughest people mentally, which I do believe that a lot of people don't have that from previous experience. When your confidence is knocked within sport, it's do or die. Like, you can make or break your career, and it's very difficult, I feel, to overcome something when you've had moments in your life, especially in your earlier life, where you have failed in those moments and you feel like you've disappointed people, because you don't want that feeling again.
Do you know what I always thought, and I still really think, is that being a professional athlete would be absolutely terrifying. It would be absolutely terrifying. A part of what I really love about where I am is the simple fact that I'm not fast enough to go to the Olympics. Like, it's of course I would love to be, but at the same time, I get so much liberty and enjoyment from knowing that at the end of the day, no matter how well or poorly I perform, it's my hobby. It's my hobby. I
Mm.
will still have my job. I will still make money. I will still have my people, my relationships. And as a professional athlete, that's probably a lot harder to accept when that's your livelihood. That's your identity. For many of them, it has to be. You put your absolute everything into that. And I mean, you play soccer, you're an athletic person, you must have done it competitively at some point in life, whether
Yeah,
it's
of course, yeah.
university or, yes. Was there a time where you felt that way, that like your sport was your life? It was your identity.
Yeah, and not only that, I feel that if you take the top level of any sport, the elite level, the ones that get the recognition they have earned throughout their lifetime of practice and diligence and hard work, you've got this thing that happens which these people who excel, they look kind of average compared to everyone else who excels. They're just either a little bit better or a little bit worse on given days. You've got to think throughout their whole life, training in local communities, coming through their school environment, they
You're a
have been the
star.
best. They have
Mm-hmm.
been the best. They have been touted to be the best. They've been given extra practice and training. People see them as that. That pressure has to mount, and that becomes your identity then. It becomes your identity that you are one of the best at this. But then if you're then put into the world's arena, the top level, you're then all of a sudden you're in the biggest pond there is. You're not a big fish in a small pond anymore. It's everyone's fighting for that. And I feel like the ones who excel are the ones who can build those mind models. Like you say, your mind model of being able to sit, put that aside and say, I've got great relationships, family, friends. I've got a good career that I enjoy doing, I hope.
Yes.
And and everything else. And it's a how do you frame these things in your mind to keep pushing at a high level without being crushed under the pressure?
Mm.
Because it's one thing being in running, like you say, like we both read Endure, and that plays, like we are saying, coming back to that book, having those mental models which are guided towards success in a very specific arena are hard to build, and I suppose are different for everybody.
Yes. I'm slowly coming to the realization that I think I've had the best mental situation laid out for me just out of circumstance in the last year. I think this last year was like a funny little mental wonderland that I was not in, and that is slowly going to escape me, unfortunately, at some point. And what I mean by that is it's just going to get harder in one of two ways. I will keep getting better, and the better that I get, the faster I get, the more difficult it will be to hold on to that story that I tell myself, that I've chosen is the best story I could tell myself, that running is my hobby, because I can run a 65-minute half marathon with that narrative, but I don't know if I can run a 63, and I probably can't run a 61. And those things, they do matter to me. I want to get there. And so when is it going to, well, one or two things going to happen? Either I inch towards there and it becomes more difficult to keep this thing a hobby, or, I'm going to turn 30 this year, or it just becomes harder to eventually hit those times because I eventually get older. My life gets in the way. Things that are not my hobby start taking up more of my time. And then I have to tell myself, well, 65 is as fast as you're going to get. And so when I dig into those thoughts, it's a little bit depressing, to be honest, but it's also a fun challenge, because at the end of the day, I'm the one who chooses. I'm the one who chooses, do I want to invest even more into my running, or will I eventually choose new challenges inside of running, which will be, I don't know what it'll be. But this last year has been amazing because I've been able to tell myself, well, I'm just doing this as a hobby because I'm not injured now. I'm running faster and faster. That's been a whole lot of fun. And yeah, I wonder what's next. The hope is that I can just keep doing the training I'm doing, stay healthy, improve little things, like improve little nutrition things, train a bit smarter, and then just keep getting fast. but that's hard, and then it's getting harder.
Yeah, I realize that's the one of the detriments of anyone who's dedicated a lot of their life towards athletics and sport.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, because with any skill, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. But there's no denying humans' ability to degrade over time.
Mm-hmm. And distance running is a good sport to pick, all things considered, when we're talking about general biological decline, because luckily the peak age is a bit later. But I mean, people deal with this when they turn 21 in some sports. It's crazy. It's tough on the mind. It has to be.
So I know you've. Oh yeah, it's definitely tough on the mind. I think coming back to the running side of things, telling yourself is it's a hobby is something I've used a lot in my time, especially when picking up new things, because I've
Mm-hmm.
been hyperly competitive in the past with sports, especially when I was at an age where I wasn't even thinking about the degradation in my body.
Sure.
But yeah,
Yeah.
degradation. Yeah. So it's, I say that transition period for everybody is like, where would you take that? Where would you go from that? Because being a hobby is a great thing to have, especially when when you come into a realm where there's people who are a lot better than you. And if you start comparing yourselves to them, you're going to be putting yourself down all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of seems like it's a mental trap, but it will keep you going at certain times. How do you see the transition happening for you as is now, where it's being a hobby, trying to be more competitive, and then also thinking about post running at your best?
Hmm. I'm in a very nice situation now where my day-to-day work is oddly super intertwined with my training. So a lot of what I do is I work with this digital publication called Marathon Handbook, which is running, right? It's a running podcast. We have a YouTube channel, a website, all this, and a lot of what I do in running informs the content that I will make with Marathon Handbook. So I'm luckily not in a place where I feel like I'm delaying my professional life or that I'm slowing down my relationships or impacting my relationships negatively with running. And so what I think is nice is that there's not this feeling of impending doom as much as there is this like knowledge that in order to become very fast, in order to challenge, an Olympian or to make a national team, I'll have to look at running differently. And if I do make that jump, I don't know what that will look like for work. And even my day to day life might be different, right? If someone who's trying to run a very fast marathon will likely leave Toronto in the winter for parts of the winter and go to Arizona or Colorado or and train at altitude. And that's not something I've done because, well, I have my life here, right? I've never thought about it like that. So it's these little things that might end up changing. And I'll say this: if I keep the motivation that I have right now for it, which is quite high for the next few years, I would totally love to go to go invest in myself and do those things. So I do see a few more. Hopefully, I can extend this odd period that I'm living right now a few years because I do think there's a ton left on the table in terms of times and improvement. And I've never run a marathon yet because the injuries didn't let me do that, and I want to eventually run a really good marathon. So that has to happen at some point in time.
Yeah, it makes you really appreciate those who are at the top of their game more and more. The closer you get to pushing yourself, you look at these people and think. Whereas it's kind of that fallacy of, well, yeah, it's kind of that thing where you think you don't know what you don't know, and you
Mm-hmm.
think, oh, these guys are really good, and before you might think, oh, they were blessed by God and they were just really
Yes.
talented at birth, and you think, oh, they just got to this level just because they kept on doing it. But then you realize the minute things that they do,
Mm-hmm.
which require event more and more and more sacrifice, especially as you
Mm-hmm.
get older and you start collecting things like family. Oh, sorry, yeah, like family, children, more in-depth relationships, dogs, pets, homes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sacrificing the time to do those things becomes very, very tough when if you didn't have those things, you wouldn't be in the right mindset to enjoy what it was that you're actually working towards. And that balance becomes more and more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the athlete version of it, right? For some people, I think most ambitious people deal with a version of this, even if they're outside of sport. How much to put into work and how much to put into my relationships. Like that's the cardinal question, right? For so many people. And so I don't think that we're facing anything that is unknown. It's just, I don't know, when it comes to athletics, there is this feeling of a ticking time clock, even when you're younger, because you need a healthy body for it and you don't know when the injuries come. And so many of my contemporaries and people who are much faster than I am, especially in Canada, because those are the guys that I know the most and the women I know the most, are there's a sense of urgency in what they're doing, because I think they know that, I'm at this level now. I got to go for it now. But that's not always easy with the rest of their lives. I do know people who balance all of it well, and that comes at the expense of other things. Do you know what is easier to do than I thought is at my age is living cleanly. When I was younger, I thought that the big decisions would be around how much should I run and how much can I fit partying into it. And something happened. You're 26. Something happens when you turn 29. You don't want to party anymore. It goes away. It goes away, and you don't want to drink. You don't want to touch drugs. It's been very easy to lay off the alcohol. I'll put it that way.
I've found it that being in a good relationship has helped me the most with those kind of things. Where,
yeah.
So I was around 2021 when COVID started. So I was right at the beginning / almost peak of my let's go out. My body is not a temple right now. My body
you were
is
like
a
early
warehouse
20s,
party.
right? Yeah.
And then being single at those times, that whole thing just feels like it's a courting ritual, going out making friends. I think it's something you feel like you're driven towards doing. And that's something the same questions you had of, I didn't want to go out and party. I didn't want to, same questions you were having as in, I want to party, but I want to do these things. And then this knocks me off track with that. And if I did this, it's going to mean I won't be able to do this for the next 3 days until I get back to a good rhythm. And that weekly routine was so up and down, up and down. I could never find any consistency to just get those little improvements so things could compound over time. But then getting into a good relationship where I'm happy, I can see a long-term future with, took me out of that mindset almost by surprise, where I had the first month or two we were together, I was still thinking, oh, I want to go out and party, I want to go out with friends, and now I'm like, got to juggle this, got to keep her happy and do all these things. But then very quickly I was like, do you know what? That is nowhere near as important. That does not give me as much of a buzz as it does working on something that I feel is more important for now and the long term.
Yep, I can totally relate. So I started dating my fiance around the time that you started dating as well, just early pandemic. And yeah, the combination of getting older, maybe being locked up for a while with lockdowns, and then especially, entering a relationship. It changes your mindset, because I think a big part of what drives people to go out is the unknown. It's like the potential of who you can meet, what you could do, the things that you don't know that you want to chase. And as slowly your life becomes known a little bit, you start making choices about the person you want to be, the person you want to be with, the work that you take on, the athletic goals that you have, whatever else. There remains less room for that potential, that unknown. And too much of that structure can be a bad thing too. I think you want to keep a little bit of that unknown. And every now and then I need a night out, and I use it for weddings, or when I have a good friend who's getting married, it's like, okay, this is it. This is our night.
Just every other weekend when you get to around this age.
Yeah, right. That's it. So it's now it's like once a year, and once every few months maybe. So tonight I'm an extreme hobbyist and not forget about the running for a while.
Yeah, I had it. So I just broken up with one girlfriend at the beginning of the pandemic. And then
Mm.
throughout the whole pandemic, I was living with friends. So it wasn't too bad with me because my bubble was two friends and we were all living together, smoking loads of weed, drinking, playing video games. It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, this is sweet. But then because that liberty was taken away from me, as soon as those gates were opened again, I was straight out like a gun at partying, nights out, because I couldn't do it for so long at a time where this is what I wanted to do. I'd
Hmm.
spent the whole of the pandemic just getting into not physical good shape, but aesthetically good shape. And then I
Hmm.
went traveling, backpacking, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, this is amazing, kind of thing. Until whilst traveling, I then met my now girlfriend.
Mm.
So it was a case of I felt like it was a turning point where I had my fill.
Right.
Nothing is going to be as pinnacle in terms of that way of life as what I had then. Very happy with the experiences that I had. Ready now for a new chapter.
Hmm.
Still, obviously, having those blowouts when things get really monotonous, I'd say,
Yes.
or anything
Hmm.
else. And then being able to incorporate, and I'm just genuinely enjoying that progression more than I would a night out. Being able, for me now, being able to stay, or beforehand, being able to stay consistent for a whole week without a day where I kind of mess up that balance
Hmm.
felt really good. And then progressing to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month is kind of my limit at the moment where, okay, after a month, I'm going to need a good 2 or 3 days to just let my inner child be my inner child.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
finding my athletic side and finding my health improve is been a massive thing for me, especially my mental capabilities, where
Sure.
I'm staying fit and that's allowing me to have better memory, better recall, better conversations, better relationships. And like,
Hmm.
whoa, do I want to throw that away because I want to go and binge drink for one night per week?
And then the dark little secret of not drinking very much is when you go out now, it's so much harder to encase that and come back from it. Like, yes, the hangovers are worse, but also just the the brain state will stay with you for, or at least with me, for days after it's
Mm.
happened. Whereas a 21-year-old version of me could probably do it every weekend and feel fine by Sunday night.
I think it's a skill. I think it's a skill.
I think so too. Yeah, it's a muscle too. It's a muscle as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I've come to think of a lot of things through personal training that it's all skill practice. You may be doing something, you may be running because you want to improve your time, but if you break it into very individual skills, you've got the movement within your legs, your proprioception, your cardiovascular, your mental side, and that all combines of individual skills to one compound lifestyle. And that same thing I feel goes for if you go out drinking. You get better at drinking, you're going to get better at recovering. Just like if you go out for your first ever workout or your first workout after a month or so off, it's going to feel like shit.
Hmm.
So if we're only
Hmm.
drinking after for going heavily once per month or occasionally more, we're going to feel like shit afterwards. That recovery is going to
Hmm.
take a lot longer, and it just doesn't feel as justified when you get those rewards. Like especially with what you're doing now, I feel if you sounds like you found a very healthy balance between your athletic work, your training, and your mental work and your actual financial work you do to bring the bills in, to pay the bills.
Hmm.
That balance is so incorporated into one lifestyle that you can stay in that zone very healthily and happily, which is amazing.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I think I'm lucky that in my line of work, you don't really benefit much from having to drink. So I ran varsity cross country between the age of 18 and 22, 23, and many of my best friends to this day are people that I met in that period. We're still all very tight, and we all took very different paths in life. Some became lawyers, some became doctors, some became professors. A very very driven bunch of people. I think it self selects for the ambitious types, and so everyone's doing something cool, but it's also disparate and different. And a few of my former teammates and best friends, they entered the corporate world, and I couldn't believe how much you had to give into that lifestyle in order to fit in and frankly have a chance at advancing inside of that world. I feel lucky that there's no real part of my life that it makes me feel like I'm losing out if I don't engage in that stuff. So for that, I think I'm lucky.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of the modern world, I suppose, because exactly what you're saying. Had friends who've gone into that corporate world, and it's from our perspective, from the outside, it does seem, doesn't it, that they are a changed person and they've sold their soul for something that we personally, as a group, didn't see valuable 5 or 10 years prior.
Mm.
And it is tough. And I feel one way or another, whether it's intentional or accidental, we all do that. But in the modern world, we have now got a choice where for the people who are brave enough to break out of that, if they didn't feel like it suited them, they can start to find their people and carve their own lifestyle in a way that's never before been able to be done.
Mm-hmm. Totally, totally. My fiance and I had this discussion where it's like, even just as recently as 10 years ago, people felt like they had to fall into a number of jobs that are very well known: like teacher, doctor, lawyer, firefighter, and more now. It's like, have you gone to a party lately and asked just a bunch of random people what they do for a living? You're gonna know, or at least I will recognize like 3 out of 10 jobs, and 7 people will say something that I'm like, oh, okay, and they'll throw in a couple words like integrated, AI, synergy, and I'm like, okay, well that's cool, but it's a very tailored job to something that they're good at and that fits their unique set of skills, right? That people have 2 or 3 skills and they merge them together to go and work this particular job that works really well for them, or they are one of the early employees in a really niche startup that had no purpose 10 years ago but has a purpose now. And so I totally agree. Nowadays it's there's way less of a prescribed way of being as an employee. You might still fall into that corporate culture, but the majority of people who live in this city, and well, Toronto's is probably Sydney is probably like Toronto, where it's an expensive place to live. You need, if you don't have generational wealth, you have to be working and you have to be making good money to stay here. And so most of the people that I know are working hard and they're doing their own thing.
Yeah, it is like a very more. Have you heard of it, ikigai?
Ikigai.
Ikigai, the Japanese principle. Let me just search this up now, just so I can make
Oh
sure I get the
yes,
principles right.
it's like integrating work in life for a really long time throughout your life. Is that what it is?
Sort of. So it's basically yes, but ikigai has four main pillars, which is where the idea being in this Japanese centric ideology is you've got to find something which completes the Venn diagram for what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you are good at.
Oh, cool. Okay, that's totally different. Nice. What you love, what the world needs, what you're
What
good
you can be
at,
paid for, yeah.
and what you can be paid for.
Yes, those four.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which there's a ton of books on this. It's become quite popular recently, um, which makes a lot of sense. Which is where a lot of people find themselves now that it's not just an industry-driven world anymore, where you have to go into these things or else you're not going to be able to do anything. It's so
Mhm.
interconnected and integrated that we, especially the privilege that we have in Western society, that we have a choice of what we want to go into. So the biggest decision in our whole life is what is that decision, and it doesn't have to necessarily be one that's made straight away, but that philosophy says that if you can find something that ticks all these boxes, you're going to be pretty content with what you end up doing.
Mm. Hmm.
And
And that's tough. That's an art. You need to be patient for something like that, right? Because in my experience, and also most people that I know, they didn't find their thing. They didn't find that thing when they were 21. It takes time.
yeah, well, I'm seeing this more and more and more now. The older that I get, saying this at 26, like I'm old, but from that coming out of that educational system where the whole idea was the whole idea was you go to school, you're prepped on these tests and certain requirements. They're always asking you what you wanted to do, go into different work consultants, then going to university or college, and it's all preparing you for that workforce at an age where you truly have not even seen the world yet. You
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen it. You don't know what it is and what's available. And a lot of people don't even know what they themselves personally enjoy because they're just doing what everyone else does because they enjoy it as a group.
Mm-hmm.
So to be thrust into that world, I feel it's so unfair for people who have almost at times been captured. Not everybody, obviously. A lot of people enjoy their jobs, enjoy their lifestyles and their life in a corporate position. I feel a lot of people get thrust into this world where they essentially didn't have complete autonomy of what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
But now, because they're
So
so invested, they can't get out of it very easily.
yes,
And the longer that goes, the harder it becomes to break free.
agreed. And that's so that I've like changed my position on that a little bit because I used to think exactly that way, and I still think that way till up to like 80% of it. Because I've seen friend after friend, and especially childhood friend after childhood friend. Because I'm not from Toronto originally. I'm from a very very small village in the eastern part of Canada. It's a 2,000 person village, and most people still live there. It's somewhat rare for someone to leave and not really come back. And because there are, there's a select number of jobs there, and people make their lives there, and they're quite happy there. But it's a different way of life. And I've seen childhood friend after childhood friend get a job at an early age, and they're still in this job, and they don't really feel like they want to leave this job. And you somewhat see the future for them, that they will be in that job in the same life for the next 20, 30 years. Nothing wrong or not with that, but it's, you have to ask yourself, is that what you really want? And I've changed my position a little bit on that because I felt that this is just the case for everyone. They get captured in university, they jump on the first opportunity because they need the money, fair enough, and then they're stuck there, and it's not fair. But I think what really needs to happen is, yes, people need to take the first job. They need the money and they need the life experience. But I think it's incumbent on a person to stay awake during their time at work and decide whether or not they want to stay. Like you do make the call at the end, especially if you're living in a westernized city, a big city where the opportunities are pretty boundless. It's possible to stay in a job, make money, earn some savings, even if the economy is tough. And I get it, the economy is tough, but earn some savings and invest in yourself to jump to the next thing. Because eventually, if you're not directing yourself towards something that motivates you, you won't enjoy the life that you live. And you need to kind of take these first couple difficult steps in order to make money in that new thing that you like, and get and reach that what do you call it,
Ikigai, yes, Ikigai.
ikigai, yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
For sure. I think it's I mean, now more than ever, people can see that. People can see all over social media, all over online, where it's not just the same 3 to 5 channels or whatever channels that has come to be on television. You can see people doing what they enjoy. And as much as people say it's a bad thing that you can compare yourself to all these people all the time, you can now see the positive things from that. Because to a
Hmm.
large percentage of people, yes, they may be looking down on their own lives because of then they aren't where this other person might be and whether they feel like it's just fair or whatever or not. But a large percentage of people don't sit there and just be miserable about that. A large percentage of people now do something about it. Like your first job, I encourage everybody to get a shitty first job,
Hmm.
a terrible first job that you hate just because your parents aren't supporting you as much as they were when you were younger. Because you're going to do that job for so long. And if you do it for long enough, you think, fuck, what am I doing? Like, what? I don't want
Hmm.
to do this. I don't want to do a job anything like this. I need to find something
Hmm.
that I enjoy. And that starts that rolling to then finding something you really enjoy, whether you're paid well
Hmm.
for it or it's just a hobby. You you don't find that. You don't look to find something that's enjoyable unless you're unhappy.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's a weird world for that.
Yes. I think a lot of people get discouraged because we create this weird idea in our minds that it's very from black to white, where you work as a corporate lawyer and you hate your life as a corporate lawyer. And so you leave corporate law, you start a hot air balloon company, and there you go, you made a whole lot of money. Like, that's not how it works. It's such an incremental little thing that you might not even notice when you're taking the right little steps to get there. Like, I'm, I think I'm still pretty early on in that journey of finding more and more meaningful work. But I think I've taken a few good steps. When I got out of school, I first took a job in communications for a track and field national sport organization because I liked track, I liked writing, um, I liked content, and so that job was adjacent to all of that, and so I took that job, and that wasn't really what I wanted to do. It was more of a starting role, and so when I saw a chance to leave that job, I did, and then started freelance writing. And well, I liked writing, but I couldn't quite get the roles that I wanted. So I wrote about a bunch of different things: business, real estate, tech, all things that were not really my main interest, but they were gigs, right? And they were helping me get the reps in. And then from there, I got to start writing a bit about health and fitness. And from there, I got a column in health and fitness. And there, I got a chance to start making content about running, out of all things, which I really love. And so it's like these tiny little steps that change over time. But if I would have told myself, or even more my parents, right out of school, I'm going to be a running YouTuber, I'm going to make YouTube videos about running, they would have sat me down quickly and been like, okay, no, get a real job. But these things, like, you kind of don't know when they'll happen, but you just need to be awake for when the opportunities come, and orient yourself towards them really slowly. And I think eventually you do get there, but it's just, that's the thing. People get afraid that it's this one fell swoop, and no one has the guts to make one fell swoop. And I get it. That would feel insane.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like the introspects advantage, where just being slightly aware constantly of how you're feeling about different things that are happening. You haven't got to have the answers. You don't need a map, but you've got a compass, which just tells you if this feels right or doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
As much as it's like, it only makes sense in reverse. If you trace your steps, it's like, oh yeah, this is obvious. This is where I am now and what I'm doing. But in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, it's, if you can almost be disciplined enough to say, I'm not going to accept something that I'm not happy with, even if that doesn't financially make sense, because it's a lot easier to build a plan of how life will go if you take that corporate job. You take that job, you can
Mm-hmm.
see there's progression here. After 5 years, you can be a manager. After 5 years, you can be an executive, and you can keep stepping. And that feels very safe and secure. But I feel I always kind of get that sense personally that if I aren't feeling happy day to day, I'm not going to be feeling happy in 5 to 10 years doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean not to
Mm-hmm.
make sacrifices or do things you don't like. I don't like. However, I'm not going to get this by doing that. Like, that
Mm-hmm.
mentality and that happiness or enjoyment out of things in its own right is a skill. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that's a skill that I feel like I can practice that skill. And the more I practice that skill, the better and more easily I'll be able to make the tough decision to do something that I enjoy, as opposed to something that may make a lot more sense and be more beneficial, at least financially or securely in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're tugging on like purpose, and purpose is so weird because we don't we're not many people are very good at articulating their purpose, especially earlier on in life. But we're all pretty good purpose detecting machines, I think, where when we're doing something that aligns with our purpose, even if we can't articulate that purpose, we're kind of like, yeah, this feels right. Like when I started a YouTube channel just for fun during the pandemic. That's what I was up to when you were with your buddies. I was home with my parents in a small village, and so I started this YouTube channel. And it was kind of a joke. It was me and my sister and a friend from my neighborhood, and we just film some running videos and tell jokes, and it was very non-serious. And I think we built it up to maybe 300 subscribers by the end of the summer in a time when people were starving for content. All we could muster up were 300 subscribers. But there was something about that channel that just felt right. I was like, I like making content. I like telling a story. I've never done this YouTube stuff before, but I enjoy it. I want to do this again sometime. And it's like there's something talking to you when in contrast, when I was in communications and writing press releases, something was telling me, okay, no, get out of there. Don't do this.
Mm,
I don't know why, but just don't do this. Have you had that
mm.
experience before?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. It's a very silent kind of feeling from deeper in, and not it's not in the frontal cortex of this is a specific reason as to why I don't like this or don't want to do this. But you
Mm-hmm.
get the sense where it almost feels like lying in a way to me, where if I
Yeah.
say something which is a little bit untruthful, you get that feeling of, I probably shouldn't have said that, or I probably shouldn't be doing this, or this isn't
Mm-hmm.
authentic to myself. Even if you don't know what that is, it doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you do that
Mm-hmm.
thing that feels right, it's almost like you're weightless. Like, okay, that was good. That
Mm-hmm.
was good. Regardless, like, and it's very often I feel that those things are things that don't have any tangible benefit to the outside perspective of the outside world, but
Mm-hmm.
more and more through doing and having to work jobs that I didn't like you say, and things that didn't feel right, crave more and more that thing that does feel right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing that you can stay consistent with. That's the thing that you can build and grow over time. That's the thing that you want to dedicate more time to, even if it's at the detriment of other things which may make more sense. And 100%, definitely. And I feel like it goes, for a lot of people, that might be hobbies. I feel like a lot of people can't quite bring themselves to break free from that corporate world to really dive into going from a hobby to a project to a business to a movement.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that scale wherever someone's at throughout that, I'm sure they'll find their path within that. And I don't know if that comes down to too much fear, upbringing, genetics, or bravery, or whatever that might be, but it feels good to do something which you really enjoy doing. And that's
Mm-hmm.
self-explanatory.
Totally. And what I'm learning is that that feeling can look so different for different people. And I think out here in the city, I'm in a little bit of a bubble because I'm surrounded by people who have the same idea as I do for what that purpose should look like, where it's like just create the most true expression of yourself, put that out into the world through whether that's a business or a movement, like you say, but I think that can look different for different people. And I'm starting to realize that even with my own family, my own parents, where for them, purpose, as soon as we were born, was not about them at all. Like purpose was raising the kids, and for them, the job that my mom has gone on record saying that she found her job boring every now and then was part of that purpose. So that was like, it's kind of like me doing the hard 400-meter repeats, which suck and aren't fun. And I've done them last week and I've done them the week before, and I'm tired of them. But it's serving a higher purpose, so that I'll do all the 400 repeats you make me do. And so it took me a while, I think, to understand that that purpose doesn't have to look like what I do or what you do or what many of like my closest friends around here do. Sometimes it looks super different.
Yeah, being able to separate that want from a need feels like a very defining characteristic for those kind of things. Yes, purpose is such a vague term, but when you know there's something that you feel that you have to do, you do it. You don't
Mm-hmm.
shy away from it. It's deeper than if I do this, I get this, I get this, I get this. It's like, okay, that's you've got like for me, it's been a fear coming to an age where myself and my girlfriend are getting to where we're now thinking about over the next few years, we'd like to have children. Like, don't know exactly when, but we don't want a life without children, but we don't want them necessarily right now.
Mm-hmm.
And because we've both worked in childcare quite a lot, we
Mm-hmm.
know very well that when that time comes, like you say with your mother, when that time comes, almost everything else just goes by the wayside and is not as important as this little light of you and your most loved one is anymore.
Mm,
And I feel like for me at this moment, being able to separate what I want to do versus what I need to do has been very helpful with that. And
mm,
boiling it down to almost like first principles, where okay, I need a roof over my head, I need to pay the bills, I need to have some form of enjoyment in my life, or else I'm not going to want to live. And then anything else, as much as it may feel pressing to do, is a want. So if it's a want, I don't have to stress about that
mhm,
because I decided that I want to do this. I don't have to stress about having to do this. I do it because I want to do it. And therefore, everything that comes with that, I must want to do as well. If not, I'm not going to do it. I don't need to.
mhm.
Which I'm still kind of ironing out the kinks of that theory at the moment. But it's working well right now.
Good. Well, that's tough because I feel like even sometimes things can shift between want and need. The one thing that I think I struggle with putting it inside of one of those categories is running. Do I want to run or do I need to run? And some days it feels like need because it's part of my life. It's part of my everyday life. And so I won't set up a day in a way where I can't do my training that day. And so does that sound like a want or a need? I want to tell people and myself that it's a want, but sometimes it feels
Well,
like a need.
I'd argue that a certain degree of enjoyment falls under need.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do not have that enjoyment to some degree, whether it comes from running, whether it comes from watching Netflix, or whether it comes from a relationship, or whatever it might be, if you don't have that certain level of enjoyment, you're not going to live. People take their own lives all the time. Depression,
Mm.
anxiety, those things are real. And the combat to that, in my opinion, is to find something that you enjoy doing. So if your most concentrated form of enjoyment comes from running, I'm not saying it's your main or your biggest form, but your most concentrated, where you say, if I get an hour's worth of running in today, that's going to give me a lot of enjoyment, then yes, I'd put that as a need.
Okay, well, you're validating me a little bit. That's good. That's good. Now it's to convince people that I need it twice a day. Now that might be harder.
Well, not anymore. Your training block's down to one.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it.
You're not doing a good job of convincing your coach.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing, I guess.
But it's interesting you say though, because when it comes to sports, and anyone who's had a kind of a sporting background or history or grown up with physical fitness as a priority, like it does so much feel like if you don't get that in, almost like a failure. It feels like there's something missing if you don't do that, whatever that might be. And I get that. And if I go for, I can have the odd day or day off, but I get to 2 or 3 days without doing something that is physically demanding of me, which is enforced upon myself,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start going through the motions and spiraling a little bit. And I'll know why it is now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's like two things that happen. I think one is just like your here and now chemistry, right? You don't get the endorphins that you've somewhat become addicted to. Your brain is doing something different than it's become used to doing every other day, and so you're a little bit more irritable on the daily. But then the other thing is, if you've committed to a training block, and you know this as well as me, like the better you become as an athlete, the more that you will be sensitive to the little lackings of a training block. Where if you missed week 3 of 12, you might feel it on week 12. Also, you might not. Right. So some of these things we somewhat make up in our heads sometimes, but it's true that the better you get, the harder it is to falter. If you're chasing after that last 1% that your body can muster, it makes no sense to miss a few days of training here and there. And so you get that here and now awful chemical feeling, and then that maybe more prolonged uh, planning feeling that you feel like you've failed yourself in the long run. So it is kind of awful. That's the flip side of going in harder and harder into training and chasing goals. And again, that's another reason why I'm like, man, I'm happy I'm not a professional athlete. The most heartbreaking story that I can think of is, opening my Instagram or whatever and having a professional athlete that I know announce that they're going to miss the Olympics because they tweaked their hamstring in June. It's the worst thing.
Yeah, it's like, I think you touched on it earlier as well, which again, the sense that everybody kind of suffers with in these areas is that those chemicals in our head manifest in the way of the story that we tell ourselves. And if you are an athletic person and you've set your mind to these goals, that story, that narrative is what will keep you turning the page. And if something's incongruent with that, I feel like we start to feel disingenuous with our own character
Mm-hmm.
in that story.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've already committed so much to a certain thing, and it almost feels silly to dismantle it. And I've changed my thinking a little bit around why that hurts so much when you set a goal and something happens, you get hurt, you can't do it. And I think when I was a little bit younger, it was about, what are people going to say? What am I going to tell XYZ person? How can I justify to other people, continuing to train next season? And now I just really don't care about that stuff, but it's become personal. It's like, if I screw it up in a way, I really have this feeling that I'm letting myself down.
Mm. Yeah, I used to suffer with that a hell of a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only more recently coming into podcasting over the past
Mm-hmm.
year that that is more subsided, because I feel that it's very easy within sports, athletics, anything physically demanding. You get such an instantaneous feedback that you can write that story as it's happening. But then when it comes to doing something where it's delayed, it's hard to be able to carry on that story without ruminating over it and without changing it based on the results that you get further down the line, which you don't know about. So especially with things like running, things like sport, like I love competitive sport, I love team sports personally, because you know the result. If you win your individual battles or you win the game, that is the result. There was something good within what you were doing. But then taking that now to a different arena, such as podcasting or content creation for yourself, I feel that because what you're doing is A, delayed, and then B, reliance on so many other factors and algorithms and things that aren't necessarily intrinsic and natural,
Mm-hmm.
the only way that you can continue telling that story and stay in the game long enough to get any kind of reward from that is to find that joy in that moment from whatever it was you were doing, whether that be the people you're working with or the, like for me, I remember doing so vividly my first ever podcast over a year ago now. And I wasn't, so it wasn't something I ever thought I'd do previously, but I remember a friend saying, "Oh, you'd be good in a podcast."
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it. I was having a bit of a tough time. And then I started it and invited him on as my first guest. Sat there, spoke to him for about 2.5 hours. I remember clicking end call, lying back and being like, whoa, that felt pretty fucking great. Like that felt
Yeah.
great. Doing that
Okay.
recording, having that conversation felt amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I was like, okay, regardless of anything else, that feeling felt good enough to want to do it more and more. So that's been, and then from doing that, that also played into my mindset going into every conversation, like with yourself, that hell, regardless of how it works, I want to carry on doing it. And I feel that the audience responds to that. The audience can tell if you're feeling free and enjoying yourself with what you're doing, and they pick up from that, which is
Mm-hmm.
such a hard thing to get your head around when people are so intent on looking at metrics as opposed to what they're actually doing. I don't know if you
Yeah.
found anything similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've experienced the reverse, the exact reverse of that. When I started writing for a living, I told myself, well, hey, I made it. This is what I wanted. I wanted to do something for a living that I really like. And something somewhat quickly happened, like a few months in, I started becoming very conscious of how much each assignment paid. And a part of it was out of necessity. You need to know these things to make your choices and you need to pay the bills, right? But as I fed into that and as I gave into that, I started being almost hyper conscious to the point where I would take on an assignment and I would think more about the reward than the assignment itself. And that will happen when you take on an assignment that you don't really care about. And that started happening quite often. And what happened was that it would take the enjoyment out of the assignment. I was more concerned with being done than with getting a little bit immersed inside of the assignment and producing something good. And so, yeah, as soon as the focus went towards the end result, the enjoyment was gone. And so it's kind of you experience kind of the opposite. You stop thinking about, when you started the podcast, there was no way you were thinking about podcast metrics on your first episode. You probably barely knew how to operate Spotify, right? It's just, I'm going to talk and we'll see how we can upload this on the internet later. And there is something nice to that. And I think so. A lot of the good breakthroughs come from that. That's kind of the ethos of a startup, right? Where
Mm.
you don't know where it's going. You're not guaranteed. You might not even be guaranteed pay at all, but you believe in the thing, and so you invest a lot in the thing, and then one day, hopefully, there's a big reward. But you haven't tied your motivation to that reward every single time. And I also I also feel that when I post on socials, because the metrics, they stare at you right in the face. And I've had to remind myself recently, like, don't keep refreshing the thing. Like, this is not what it's about. Make something good, write something good, film something good, and the results may or may not follow depending on how TikTok's algorithms feeling that day, right?
Yeah, it's a
Mm.
it's such a bizarre way to look at it. I think because everyone responds well to good feedback, and those metrics staring you in the face is a very good way to respond to that. However, I remember testing this once where when I was looking at trying to get some more views, and quite early on this was, I changed the way that I had the conversations where
Mm.
I went from just having free flowing conversations with a couple of mates to having people like yourself on and people who are more of an expert or know a lot more about a certain field or area. And I
Mm.
remember doing loads of research and writing loads of questions about these people that I wanted to ask. And I recorded that podcast, edited it in a way that would do what better, and the clips that would do better. The results were better.
Mm-hmm.
However, did not enjoy actually speaking to that person whatsoever. I didn't feel that
Sure.
they enjoyed speaking to me.
Yeah.
I didn't have any contact with that person afterwards. And it was like, oh, okay, so why did I just do all this? Was it
Mm-hmm.
for that? And I just lost that element which made it so addictive. Because you've got obviously that secret rule of the universe that no one quite understands, which is the rule of exponentiality. And then me and you both knowing with our athletic background that without consistency, you have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to really sit there and think, okay, if I were to do this way and maybe get better results, yes, I get better results, but I know for a fact I don't get enough enjoyment from this to be able to stay in the game. So I started to pivot and orientate towards, okay, what's going to keep me in the game long enough to see good, well-lasting rewards in a few months, a few years, a few decades, which I'd be happy to do in my 70s. I thought, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
prefer this way. I prefer this way because of it. And then I feel like that comes from an athletic thing where with running especially or any kind of sport, if you didn't enjoy actually doing that sport, you're not going to carry on doing it. Metrics
Mm-hmm.
alone will not get you there. Whether it's your split
Yeah.
times, whether it's your VO2 max, your sleep score, those things may all be going in the right direction. But if you're not enjoying the actual part of that, even if that's just enjoying pushing yourself or enjoying that endurance of something difficult and discipline, you're not going to stay in the game long enough to do something worthwhile or meaningful to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Totally. And I've noticed this weird thing that's happening on socials, especially where the algorithm is very strong. And I'm thinking about this because it's like, yeah, you're you can create something, but you're creating something that isn't you. And when you're so I'm part of what I do is I try to create videos that get a lot of traction, right? I post on my own account
Mhm.
and I post on Marathon Handbook's account. We post together and we try to get a whole lot of views. And what I do is you've seen them. They're skits, right? They're skits, and some of them do well. People like them. I know there's a way to make videos that get more views than the skits. There are these running videos that people make that are about 7 or 8 seconds, which is like the optimal length for an Instagram reel. It's videos of them running with a nice backdrop, with a voiceover of some sort, maybe like a motivational quote. And you put the motivational quote, you put the text, and these things every now and then will get like 14 million views, and boom, there go your followers. And then they see your other things, and away you go. And we haven't really done much of these things, and I don't really do much of those things because I don't really believe in them as a concept, and that's not the voice I want to put into the world. That's not part of what I want to create. And so instead, we stick with our potentially more difficult way of growing, but truer way of growing that will keep me around. Because if you tell me the game is try to post a 7 second clip of someone running every week and put a motivational quote and see if people like it, at the end of the day, it's, I don't really care about that. But at the same time, it depends what's serving a greater goal. And if the greater goal is to get people to learn about my account or the Marathon Handbook, for example, well then there's a case for doing that. So it is a bit of a nuanced thing. But when it comes to something that you are creating that you're proud of, you might as well do it in a way that actually resonates with you.
Oh, for sure, definitely. I feel that what's harder for beginner creators, especially,
Mm.
on top of exactly what you're saying, is that you cannot afford to hire somebody to do the stuff that you aren't passionate about. So you've got to do it yourself. When you're doing these videos, recording them, checking these metrics, it becomes then very difficult to stay in the game and enjoy it for long enough because you've got to do so much of the stuff you don't enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to all the admin bits, all the technical bits, all these things that you can't afford to have somebody else do. You're just starting. You don't really know what you're doing yourself yet either. And that stress only then comes out in what you're doing. It's like taking that analogy to, if you look at like what you're doing now with your coach, you've taken the thinking part and the analysis paralysis out of it so you can focus on the part that you enjoy the most. And you've
Mm-hmm.
entrusted this person who knows what they're talking about, who will potentially do a better job than you would doing it just for yourself, to
Totally,
do it
yeah.
for you.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if we can do that, then yes, maybe you can package whatever it is that you want in a way that's palatable to the way that social media and TikTok works at the moment. But I know exactly what you mean when you're sitting there having to edit things, or the idea of editing something you don't believe in. It's like, oh, it's got to be more to it than this. Because it does
Yeah,
feed into
yeah.
that. And I don't know if we're going to get out of that anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. I've developed a weirdly cynical view of how people consume social media, and this is also partly by researching what does well online. And I think there is this element of like people like what they recognize sometimes. If you
Mm.
are a runner, let's keep that example, and you're scrolling through your reels and you see a reel that only takes 7 seconds of your time, and that's a motivational quote: pain is weakness leaving the body, and this person is running in the backdrops of the mountains in British Columbia, Canada, or in Hyde Park in London. It's like, I give the like and move on. And you don't know who posted it. You won't remember the person who posted it, but you'll give it the like and you'll move on. And which will augment those clips just because it's what we've come to expect, and so we like what we've come to expect. And I just think that it's this somewhat weird cycle when something like really good comes on. Like I try to make a point of this when I'm consuming content myself, and then People make really fantastic reels now, right? There are these like editing softwares that are just out of this world with all this animation, and you wonder how much time it took these people to make those reels. When I come across something like that, I make sure to like it and comment it, because I think, wow, in a medium where you could make something like this, you could make a reel in 3 minutes. This person's gone out of their way to really make like some art out of this. I'm gonna like it. That's what the algorithm should push forward, not the 7 second clip once again.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just because it's all quite new, and this whole algorithm way of creating content is new to the world, and
Mm.
whether or not as a society we all mature enough to realize that that's not what we want and we're going to shut off from it eventually.
Mm.
Because I almost think it's criminal, the fact that they do that, because a lot of these things are aimed, let's be real, aimed towards teenagers and adolescents. They're aimed because it's like sugar, it's like candy, it's very easy. It tricks certain parts of your brains and fires these chemicals. And then at some point, when we're talking about it, and we are speaking about it earlier, about our change in mindset from wanting to go from one style of living, going for the parties, the drinking, that culture, that really quick feedback response to our brains, to more of a long term, more meaningful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to tell. I feel that all the people consuming this, for the most part, is that limited to where they are then, and most of it being teenagers who scroll for hours per day.
Mm.
Because attention has become a commodity, but I feel that that attention comes down to connection at its core. And that's where, like, so I look at, for example, for me, in the industry I'm in, like Joe Rogan, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Love him or hate him, he's built a massive worldwide following, and
Huge.
his style of doing so has been the most least flashy thing possible. There's no
Mm-hmm.
fancy edits that he does. There's no big team looking at metrics and whatnot. And yeah, he didn't get there overnight, but over the course of 10, 15 years, done that. And every single one of them at its core has been him forgetting about the metrics and just having a conversation with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Over a long time horizon, I feel like that does win overall. Like that whole Rome wasn't built in a day, but you could take a picture of it in a second and post it online.
Yeah, yeah, and you can make that you can make that um, recognition effect, let's call it, like you like what work for you if you've been around for longer. I mean, Joe Rogan likely gained a whole lot of followers before even saying a word on his podcast, because people knew him from Fear Factor or his comedy, right? So there is a power in longevity. That's the exponential effect too. That someone sticks around for long enough, they'll probably get in people's good graces. And if you're a fan of Rogan or a fan of anybody else, you will give these people the benefit of the doubt when you listen to them, and
Mm.
you might be less skeptical of what they have to say. You might already be won over by them. And so that makes it easier for someone like that to stay on top and even grow their following. So, but that's commendable, right? Someone who's been there for so long, is that they've stuck with it.
Yeah, well, let's take him back to one thing we've spoken about this whole time is that I feel like over a long time horizon, you will get better and better at those skills that you've practiced the most. Which,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, for things like athletics, like we said, your time horizon has to be a lot shorter because your body will not be any more physically able than it is right now for the majority of people. You can train better, but you will never be able to get to that peak. It's a peak for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing something intellectual, say with your writing, the writing that you do up until you're especially if you're continuing with your cardiovascular work, will in essence always get better and better and better and better and better. As a
Mm-hmm.
skill, you're going to get so much better at that, but way longer than your body will be able to physically exert energy.
Mm-hmm.
Same with conversations, same with a bunch of other things. So it's very interesting. I feel now transitioning to that side of what can we do, which we will continue to be able to work on without fear that we're fighting a losing battle, like you say with a lot of your
Mm-hmm.
running friends.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so true. Yeah, and I think about that, right? what's still going to be a part of me in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, when my body is different, when the way we do work is different. In journalism, we think about AI and its changes so much, just like in pretty much all the industries, right? And the best read that I have on it so far is the people who will be safe, or the skills that are safe, or the skills that will relate to people's humanity and their weird little idiosyncrasies, right? If you can uh, recognize something as independently and totally Bailey, that's going to be good in the future, because people like people. And so the more of the personal imprint you can put on things, as long as that imprint is good and compelling and engaging, useful, that might be the currency. Like, that's probably what's going to live on. So we think about that a lot, is how much, how can we put something into the world that's very much us, and that will still have some value when ChatGPT can do most of the things that we can do.
Definitely, definitely. I think especially when it comes to content, writing video content, long format, short format, the way
Mm-hmm.
that people take in their information now, where it's not from books or teachers, people who want to self-educate. I feel that education by people, unless you're an expert in that field, I feel like it's just going to drop off. I feel like there's no potential reason to have an article. Obviously, this is my opinion. I could very well be wrong, but there could be no reason to have an article or a piece that is informing somebody about something,
Oh yeah,
because
for
that
sure.
information is now done by the highest level researchers and is integrated into these language models, which can tell us that. What we want to hear is our favorite person's take on that information,
Mm-hmm.
to sort of
Yeah.
filter out what is useful to us based on a character side of things, because this person is similar to me in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've heard some takes on how the reporters will all be gone and the opinion writers will live on, and I think that's perhaps in part true. But the reporters won't be gone. The reporters who simply report the facts, maybe. I think the value of a really good reporter will always exist. There are some reporters in Canada who live near the parliamentary buildings, right? Who report on the politics of the prime minister and the prime minister's cabinet, and they can do that because they've developed relationships with these people, and they know the inner politics, and they know the gossip, and they know who to talk to, and they know to not approach this person in on the mornings because they're grumpy in the mornings, but they do it in the afternoon, and they go for coffee with this informant every 3 months because this informant knows some stuff that no one else does. And it's like these reporters will always have work because they've taken their job at a higher level, at more of a human level. They have the intangible. But yeah, they're like, hey, go to City Hall and find out what the new policy is. I can't see
Mm.
how we're still going to need someone who does just that in just a few
Yeah.
years' time.
Yeah, yeah, especially considering that we're all so story based. We love a good story. We love the gossip. We
Mm-hmm.
want the goss.
Of course.
If you have those investigative journalists, looking at sort of more American and Canadian media from the other side of the world, for me, it seems like it very much is the case that a lot of it is opinionated and
Oh
often
yeah.
puff pieces at times anyway. And now it's the fact that people can see that it is, they don't care. They're just going to take it with a grain of salt because they know that's what it is, but they'll still consume it as entertainment. Where a lot of the actual media outlets themselves, I feel like, don't realize that the majority of people know this. Where if you look at the world, especially obviously the USA, you look at, okay, so all the media says that these people are bad, but yet the majority of the people actually like them and voted for them.
Mm-hmm.
Make it make sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
My parents, they go to the United States. They're retired from their jobs now, and so in Canada, what you do is you leave in the winter if you can, because the winters are brutal here. So they go to Florida, the south of the U.S., and they I don't think they were aware that like there are some clear right wing channels and some clear left wing channels. And so when I got there, I think it was Fox. Like it was just Fox all the time. And one point, my dad looks at me and says, yeah, they really like Trump. It seems on this channel. I'm like, yeah, that's how it is. Like Fox is the Trump channel, and CNN is the other one. And so you need to know this if you're consuming American media. And he was like, oh my god, that's crazy. I said, yeah, that's how it is. You kind of need both, and then you choose which makes sense on each.
So that's where I feel like it could get tough going forward, because of now individuals having the power in these areas and arenas. If an individual is captured, but then you can't, they're to themselves, they feel that they remain a neutral. That's where I feel like it's going to be even tougher for people to make that decision. Just going back to the example of Rogan, as we mentioned it previously, he's very much a right-wing kind of guy, as the general media would have you presume. But then people who watch him would see him as a neutral, as opposed to that. So it's then, okay, do you believe this person because you feel they're a neutral, even though they've very clearly got different types of tendencies? But I'd like to think and believe and have hope that people are smart enough to be able to decipher these things when they come to a certain age. Not the people that it's often aimed at, being the younger people who want that candy entertainment.
Yeah. And I think we're struggling with that as a society right now. I don't know how much American culture seeps into Australia. It certainly influences Canada. I mean, we're the neighbors, right? and so it's felt very much like people I've worked with, close friends, and colleagues, just many people that I've interacted with or that I know have chosen a side, and now that's their side, and
That's the hill they want to
so
die on.
that's it. And so every single talking point of that side they will adopt for their own. And to me, that just, it signals that it's not really critical thinking, because I think if you're thinking critically, you're taking a bit from a bunch of different places. And I hope you're right. I hope that over time people decide that, like, yeah, it's not about choosing a team. It's about treating every scenario as an individual thing. It's incredibly hard to do this when your maybe your family, maybe your workplace, maybe your friends are pulling you in a direction. We just living in the city get influenced by people on both sides all the time, or the attempts are there, right? We should signal more left, we should signal more right. That these things are very present in everyday life, and I can only imagine that in America it's much worse and much more polarized too.
Well, we won't touch on that today.
Out of time, sadly.
We're out of time, unfortunately. But Alex, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed the chat. If you want to let the people know what you're up to, where they can find you, what you're doing at the moment, what you've got coming up, it's all yours.
This is the plug. Oh wow. Well, sure. My day to day is I'm a columnist at the Globe and Mail, and we publish a column called Cult of Fitness every 2 weeks. And much of my time is right now spent with Marathon Handbook, which is our digital publication, and is probably easier to find because we're on a bunch of channels. So we have our YouTube channel, we have a podcast and a website, and with them, and also for myself, I make content. So I'll make reels, running related reels that try to make it a little bit funny, try to make it a little bit relatable. And if you're still here and you're listening to running, that means you're probably a big running nerd, and you're probably on Strava. So if you're like, you want to know my splits, go and you can find out there. But no, Bailey, this was a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you, to meet someone from the other side of the world who can tell me what tomorrow looks like. That's pretty cool. And back at you. I really enjoyed our conversation. So thanks for having me on. And let me know if ever you make it to Toronto.
I will do. Anytime.